On the 31st of May 2022, a wily Colombian drug kingpin known as the chess player, who lived by the name of Gilberto Orijuela, died in a U.S. prison. He was one of the Cali Cartel leaders and rival of Pablo Escobar. After his death, his family announced that he had died of lymphoma and was 83 years old at the time. But who was Gilberto Rodríguez Orejuela, and why was he called the chess player? Even more, why was he considered a rival of Pablo Escobar? Rodríguez Orejuela, 83, helped build the Cali Cartel that operated a globe-spanning cocaine empire from their hometown of Cali, Colombia, which at some point controlled 80% of the global cocaine market, according to a report from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Back in 1975, Miguel Rodríguez Orejuela started a known criminal enterprise that fought with Pablo Escobar for the power and control of Colombia's entire drug trade. The Cali Cartel focused its violence on rival crime operations. The Orijuela brothers reportedly deployed bombs and vigilantes. They were also believed to be the masterminds of the Pepes group, who are responsible for the deaths of more than 60 of Escobar's relatives and associates.
An enormous criminal organization which at its time exported a very high percentage of the cocaine to the United States.
At the time, Pablo Escobar's drug empire was at its most prolific and profitable, known as the #1 importer of cocaine into the United States. Meanwhile, Rodríguez Orejuela and his brother Miguel built a huge criminal enterprise that fought with Pablo Escobar and his allies in the Medellin cartel for control of Colombia's drug trade.
Escobar wanted to do it through violence. We wanted to do it by corruption.
But there was a major difference between Pablo Escobar and Miguel Orejuela. Escobar was a firm believer in the power of violence, while the Cali Cartel believed they could gain more grounds through corruption. Also, unlike Escobar, who launched an all-out war on Colombian authorities and security forces, the Cali Cartel concentrated most of their violence on rival crime operations.
It worked, but what Cali brings to this is a vast level of sophistication. They use faxes, they use electronic means of shipping information, they are very, very cellularized. They could teach the CIA a few things about secrecy. They are much harder to penetrate.
It wasn't just the lack of violence. The Cali Cartel was also an organized crime empire. The Cali Cartel had a clearly defined command structure, coupled with concrete globalized networks in several countries around the world, and smaller cells that were also willing to cooperate rather than challenge the authorities. The Cali Cartel's influence was so strong that it created a legacy for future drug lords. It proved that infiltrating a state through strategic means was way more effective than using the tool of violence. In their bid to remain sophisticated, Orijuela sought to infiltrate the state, and this came at a time when the Colombian and American states focused on persecuting Pablo Escobar. They also admitted to financing political campaigns, including the 1994 run of Liberal Party President Ernesto Samper, who firmly declined to have any involvement with the donations at the time. Furthermore, Orijuela did something which was fairly uncommon at the time. He sought to be known as an entrepreneur rather than a drug trafficker. With strategic placements in Colombia's legal economy, front companies, and the use of international banks, Orijuela was able to remain unnoticed for quite a long while, a privilege which earned him easy movement in Colombia. However, in 1976, it was impossible not to link Orijuela to the drug trafficking activities that had filled the United States, Peru, and Colombia. By 1978, the authorities in the U.S. discovered his cocaine distribution network in Queens, New York, and this began his slow descent into the waiting arms of the law. In the end, the Orijuela brothers were captured in 1995 by the Search Bloc, a special forces team that was formed 6 years ago. Even though Orijuela's initial sentence was at 12 years, it was eventually reduced to 7, all thanks to his confessions and good conduct. After his release in 2004, he tried again to send 150 kilos of cocaine into the U.S., but he was captured and sentenced to 30 years in 2006. Rodríguez Orejuela's arrest by Colombian authorities in 1995 marked the beginning of the disintegration of the Cali Cartel, which had smuggled vast amounts of cocaine from Colombia to the United States in the 1980s and 1990s. During the arrest, Colombian law prohibited the extradition of its nationals, but under pressure from the US, Colombia lifted that ban in 1997. Both were found to be continuing to traffic from prison, and criminal charges were filed in Miami and New York. This is eventually where Rodríguez Orejuela will be sentenced a second time, and he will be held at the Butner Federal Prison until his death in 2022. In addition, Orijuela was able to cut an immunity deal for his family members, but this was on the condition that they would hand over the entire money from their drug trafficking careers. As expected, this caused the Cali Cartel to slowly break in its ranks, and the impact of this on the country's criminal landscape can still be felt to this day. During the 1990s, over 300 individuals and entities were sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department for ties to the Cali Cartel. Authorities fingered the Colombian drugstore chain, La Rebaja, as a money laundering front for the cartel, and the professional soccer team América de Cali was sanctioned by U.S. officials, as it had been owned by the brothers and allegedly was unable to break ties with its criminal roots. Perhaps there are still more fronts that haven't been covered by the American government. What do you think of this possibility? Perhaps they will never be found out.